Hi all, happy today. I'm Nate, aka BT Mutineer, and today I'm taking you through a beginner's guide to combat for Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. I'll explain what builds, weapons, and abilities are best for beginners, and also give you some extra tips that will help you both in and out of combat. Weapons, abilities, and Destiny cards are the most important elements of your build, so that's what this guide focuses on the most. Before we get into build-related things, I want to mention two mechanics you will come across. I think the game explains them well enough, but I'll talk you through them quickly just in case. The first mechanic, Reckoning Mode. This is a mode that you can activate by holding down a button. On PC, the default key is X after your fate bar, the middle purple one, fills by killing enemies. When you activate it, all other characters and creatures around you are slowed down, plus you take less and deal more damage. The other huge benefit, and the main reason to use this, is that any enemy you kill in Reckoning Mode gives you extra XP if you perform an execution at the end. Your fate bar will slowly drain until empty, and you can end Reckoning Mode by executing an enemy that you have brought to 0 health, which will kill it alongside any other enemies you brought down during this time. The execution also lets you button mash to increase your XP bonus further, up to plus 100% XP. If you don't execute an enemy before Reckoning Mode ends, then all the enemies you brought to 0 will get back up with reduced health, so it's a waste. The best use of this by far is in boss fights because bosses already grant a lot of XP, so you can turn that into a disgusting amount of XP with Reckoning Mode. It also makes the boss fight much easier, which is a big plus. You can additionally use it in fights against large groups of enemies that you may be struggling with, which means less overall XP but an easier time in combat. The second mechanic, Special Weapon Moves. These are on the leftmost column of each of the 3 ability trees and cost ability points to unlock. The first point grants access to a few special moves or attacks for certain weapons, then points 2 and 3 add a damage over time effect to those attacks and improve the effect respectively. Generally, I don't recommend doing much with these extra types of attacks unless you really like them. Charged attacks, which you do by holding down the attack button, can be strong, but they tend to be slow, so you need to be careful when you start charging them up since you are vulnerable to being interrupted. I personally like to use dodge attacks the most, which are performed by pressing dodge and attack. There's also block attacks, block plus attack, parry attacks. A parry is a well-timed block right as the enemy hits you, which staggers them, so you need to time your block perfectly and then attack, and delayed attacks, which require 2 basic attacks, but with a specific pause between them. Other than dodge attacks and for some weapons a charged attack, like the whirlwind of a greatsword, I find the other moves to be too finicky or slow, so the basic attack chain is better. Feel free to try these special moves out for yourself and see whether you like them. If you don't, just go to a Fate Weaver NPC to reset your abilities for a bit of gold. Now that you know about these mechanics, let's talk about weapons. There are 3 main class archetypes, Warrior, Rogue, and Mage, which map out to the 3 ability trees you have access to, Might, Finesse, and Sorcery. You can go all in on one archetype, or mix and match abilities from any 2 of them, or even all 3. Lots of different builds are viable, it's up to you what playstyle you think is most fun or appropriate for your character. Each ability tree has 3 associated weapon types. Might has melee weapons that have average or slow attack speed, but deal a higher amount of physical damage per hit. Longswords, greatswords, and hammers. Finesse has a mix of melee and ranged weapons that usually attack faster or are used in specific situations in a deadly way. Daggers, fey blades, and longbows. Finally, Sorcery has magical weapons which usually deal elemental damage, or a mix of physical and elemental, staffs, scepters, and chakrams. Rather than explain everything about each weapon, I'll tell you the best weapons for beginners. For Might, I'd choose longswords. They have the fastest attack speed out of all Might weapons, so it's easier to attack, dodge, and block while using longswords without getting stuck in an animation and being interrupted by enemy attacks. Greatswords and hammers are more powerful because they deal higher damage, but they're slow, so you have to know how to ensure you're less likely to get interrupted. I'll explain the best way to protect yourself against interruption in a bit when discussing Might abilities, but regardless, longswords are a very solid choice for your first playthrough. From Finesse, fey blades are the best because they deal damage to multiple enemies around you and they have a fast attack speed, only being surpassed by daggers. However, daggers are also amazing, especially if you want to go for a sneak attack build because they have higher damage than fey blades because it's single target. While sneak attack builds are strong, they are more advanced and not as easy to pull off as in other RPGs. You really have to work for it here. Bows are unfortunately the most difficult to play because of a limited quiver size, so that means in order to make the bow viable, you have to increase the quiver size and get extra effects for the bow attacks by investing a lot of points into the finesse tree. So bows are not beginner friendly. Fey blades remain the best due to their AoE damage and ease of use in regular combat. From Sorcery, the easiest weapons to use are chakrams because they have an average attack speed, faster than all Might weapons and staffs, They deal damage in an area, and they also have arcing attacks that hit enemies close and at range. Interestingly, even though they have a range, they are considered a hybrid melee and magic weapon type. They also receive bonuses from abilities that affect bladed or edged weapons. They deal both physical and elemental damage in a 50-50 split, and also deal the elements damage over time, shocking, freezing, or burning. These are all positives that end up making chakrams possibly the best weapon for a mage or mage hybrid build. I definitely use them in any build that has a decent amount of sorcery points. The only downside is that the passive that increases their damage is on the second tier of the sorcery tree, so you will have to invest 5 points into something else before you can start upgrading the damage of your chakrams. Staffs are okay as a starter weapon, but their attack speed is very slow, so you are extremely likely to get interrupted, which is frustrating, so unless you have interruption resistance, I don't recommend them. Scepters are very weird because their attacks consume mana, so they aren't at all beginner friendly since if you use them you have to center your entire build around them. Moving on to Destiny cards. These are unlocked by spending a certain number of points into the Might, Finesse, and Sorcery trees. Destinies will improve the effectiveness of your build by granting bonuses to different damage types, resistances, or offering utility bonuses like mana regen. There are multiple Destiny tiers, from tier 1 to 6 for pure class builds and tri-class builds, or tier 1 to 5 for dual class builds. Pure class Destinies require you to mostly put points into one single ability tree. If you reach the max level of 40, you will still have some points left over to put in any other ability trees while still getting the tier 6 pure class Destiny card if you want it. Though, as you'll see, the top tier unique bonus isn't that amazing. Might Destinies grant bonuses to melee attack damage, block efficiency, stun duration and chance to stun, and the tier 6 bonus is Last Stand, automatically resurrect with 20% health. Health drains until an enemy is killed. Honestly, just heal your character with a potion if their HP gets low. Finesse Destinies grant bonuses to ranged attack damage, damage resistance while dodging, piercing damage, crit chance, evasion, aka chance to dodge, and the tier 6 bonus is Assassination, 300% critical hit after a successful evasion. Evasion bonuses are very rare, so while the crit damage bonus is huge, it's not gonna happen a lot. Sorcery Destinies grant increased elemental damage, mana cost reduction, bonus mana regen, a teleport that replaces a regular dodge, which gets upgraded with an ice effect at higher tiers, and the tier 6 bonus is Echoes of Fate, chance to spawn Fate Echo ally per kill. The Fate Echo ally is like a temporary ghost summon that fights for you, which is probably the best ability out of the pure classes, since a numbers advantage is always good. The dual class Destinies are the harder ones to choose from. They require for you to put an equal amount of points into 2 ability trees. Finesse plus Might Destinies grant bonuses to melee and ranged damage, more to melee, crit chance, piercing damage, bonus damage while stealthed, and the tier 5 bonus is Cutthroat, plus 15% physical damage, plus 1% chance to steal health, and gold drops as 20% of damage for 5 seconds when striking fallen enemies. I frankly can't tell you what striking fallen enemies means, but the physical damage bonus is nice. Might plus Sorcery Destinies grant bonuses to elemental resistance, bonus melee attack damage, some of the damage you take is restored as mana, a teleport that replaces the basic dodge, bonus armor percent, and the tier 5 bonus is Harmonic Overload, adding a chance to produce elemental projectiles per kill. Good for a melee tank build that also uses magic or elemental damage. Finesse plus Sorcery Destinies grant bonuses to elemental and piercing damage, more to elemental, crit chance, a dread passive that guarantees you crit strike enemies that are panicking, a teleport that replaces the basic dodge which gets upgraded with a poison effect at higher tiers, mana regen, and the tier 5 passive is Drain Mana, which causes all your critical hits to restore mana. Great if you're using mana a lot with abilities or scepters, deal elemental and piercing damage, and care about crit chance. Finally, the Tri-Class, aka Jack of all trades Destinies, grant bonuses to melee, ranged, and magic attack damage equally, but a small amount, reduced equip requirements, always by 25%, bonuses to all skills, damage resistance, a small amount of crit chance, and the tier 6 bonus is Mastery of Arms, which unlocks and upgrades all the special weapon moves on the left column of each tree, while the top tier Universalist Destiny is active. This means that once you have enough ability points to unlock it, you can respecialize it of Fate Weaver to remove any points you spent into the special moves and use them on other abilities. Your build greatly depends on your primary and secondary weapons and on the most frequently used abilities, particularly on the damage they deal or other effects they have. So even if you have more points spent in one particular ability tree, it doesn't necessarily mean you should choose the pure class Destiny, because it may not give you the bonuses you need for your chosen weapons and abilities. Pure Finesse Destinies are actually best for a longbow build because they grant mostly ranged attack damage and piercing damage. It works well because bows already need a very high investment into finesse. However, if you're focusing on a dagger or Feyblade build, the highest tier abilities aren't necessarily useful, and even if you invest a decent amount into Finesse, you would actually get better bonuses if you choose a lower tier Finesse plus Might or Finesse plus Sorcery Destiny card. I recommend Finesse plus Might if you're mainly using regular attacks or sneak attacks, and Finesse plus Sorcery if you're mixing regular attacks with elemental damage spells. Pure Might Destinies are generally good for a basic melee warrior since they increase your melee attack damage, but the higher tiers give you bonuses to stun chance and stun duration, which you may not necessarily care about. So if you feel like stun doesn't help your longsword build, for example, then I recommend looking at a Might plus Sorcery build which makes you tankier with elemental resistance and armor, still grants a melee attack damage bonus, and also restores mana whenever you're hit. Pure Sorcery Destinies are the most suited for high sorcery builds because they really do give you bonuses for everything you want as a mage, so Pure Sorcery is the easiest type of build, but you also have great combinations with both Might and Finesse as I've just mentioned. Jack of all trades Destinies are really weird. You can absolutely have a strong character, but these builds are only good if you are actually taking advantage of most of the bonuses, such as using multiple damage types, switching between weapons frequently, attacking with the special moves, and so on. I absolutely loved these Destinies when I started playing Kingdoms of Amalur, but later on I realized that I wasn't using most of the bonuses, so I switched to dual class or pure class Destinies for most of my characters. In any case, since you can always switch your Destiny card and respecialize out of Fate Weaver, feel free to try even stuff that I didn't recommend just to see if you like the less beginner-friendly things. These are just my personal recommendations based on what I find easiest and most fun to play, so don't take them as rules. Moving on to abilities, I'll highlight the best abilities in each tree, focusing on the lower tiers because those are easier to mix and match. Plus, the highest tier abilities are, frankly, not that great, even if they look cool. Here are the best Might abilities: Harpoon, Relentless Assault, Vengeance, and potentially Quake. If you go higher into tier 5 of Might, Bloodlust, optional decent passive bonuses, skillful defense, and more so hardy constitution. Harpoon is a tier 1 activated ability that drags an enemy to you, or if the enemy is bigger, it drags you to them. It barely deals damage, so this is best used as a movement tool to close the gap between you and an enemy. For this reason, keep it at level 1 so that the mana cost stays low. Relentless Assault is a tier 3 activated ability that causes your hero to be immune to interruptions from enemy attacks and abilities for a short duration. You can increase the duration by leveling it up, and I highly recommend maxing it out. The drawback is that your armor will be reduced while this effect is active. However, once you max it out, it no longer reduces your armor, so it just becomes an amazing ability with 0 negatives. Interruption resistance is super important in Reckoning, especially if you use weapons that are slow or abilities that take a longer time to cast. Even faster attacks or casts can still get interrupted, so with Relentless Assault, you can just ignore enemy attacks completely. This is the best ability from the Might tree hands down, and honestly might be the best ability in the entire game. Vengeance is a tier 4 upgrade to Relentless Assault that adds a chance for your hero to reflect damage back at enemies while RA is active. The chance to reflect is fairly low, but reflecting damage is very powerful, so I still recommend maxing this out, or at least putting 1 point into it. If you're planning to get up to tier 5 of Might, it's a requirement for the Bloodlust upgrade, which is even better. Bloodlust is a tier 5 upgrade to Relentless Assault that adds a chance for your hero to steal health from enemies whenever you attack them while RA is active. You should pretty much always have RA active to be immune to interruptions, so if you have gone this far into Might, unlocking and maxing out Bloodlust is a no-brainer. Resistance interruption, chance to reflect, and free healing? Yes please. Quake is a tier 2 active ability which deals physical damage to enemies around you. It has a potential 3-cast combo if used in quick succession, where the third Quake will make enemies be temporarily stuck in rocks. This makes it a great escape or distancing tool if you need a bit of time to charge an attack or ability or just want to run away. Like with Harpoon, just get 1 point in this if you're going to use it for utility, but if you want to play as a high Might character and use Quake for damage, then you can absolutely max it out and upgrade it further with a tier 3 Aftershock passive that adds a chance to stun. There are also 2 low-tier passive abilities that are great if you have nothing else but want to get more points in Might. Skillful Defense is a tier 1 passive that increases your damage resistance while blocking. I'll be honest, I forget to use my shield most of the time and just dodge instead, so this isn't very useful for me. However, Hardy Constitution requires at least 1 point in Skillful Defense, so even if you don't block, put at least 1 point into this. Hardy Constitution is a tier 2 passive that increases your elemental resistance and health. Health is the best defensive stat because it protects you against any type of damage, and elemental resistance is very strong, third after health and damage resistance, because it reduces the damage you take from all 3 elements: ice, fire, and lightning. Here are the best Finesse abilities: Shadow Flare, Assassin's Art if you want a sneak attack build, Lunge, Smoke Bomb, Enduring Agony, and Blade Honing. Shadow Flare is a Tier 1 activated ability that has a 2-cast combo. The first cast staggers a target and deals a tiny amount of physical damage. The second cast shoots projectiles that deal piercing and bleeding damage. It's a very cheap ability even at higher levels, and the stagger is already good on its own, but the projectiles are amazing if you use this while you're right up against an enemy, since they will all hit that one enemy and deal a huge amount of damage. This is the one ability from Finesse that I pretty much always put at least a few points into and often max out, even if I'm not going any further than Tier 1 or 2 of Finesse. Assassin's Art is a Tier 1 passive that unlocks sneak attacks for daggers and fey blades at level 1, allowing you to deal huge amounts of damage or even one-shot unaware enemies. Each level also increases the damage of sneak attacks and all critical strike damage dealt to enemies while in stealth. While it's a build-specific ability, I mention it because sneak attacks are one of the main things that people who play rogues enjoy. You will also need to invest in the stealth skill to reduce the chance of enemies noticing you while you try to get close enough to assassinate them. However, you do also have an additional option that unlocks sneak attacks at any time, even after you're discovered once you reach Tier 4 Finesse. Lunge is a Tier 3 activated ability that makes your hero dash past enemies to get behind them. This is useful to only invest 1 point into, just like Might's Harpoon, to use as a movement tool to close the gap between you and an enemy. Smoke Bomb is a Tier 4 activated ability where you throw a bomb that stuns and blinds enemies for a short time, but more importantly, makes your hero become invisible for 6 seconds. The invisibility counts as stealth, so you can use sneak attacks on enemies even if you were in regular combat with them before using Smoke Bomb. This is also super useful outside of combat, since it lets you steal items from containers, pickpocket NPCs, and even murder them if you so desire, without getting any bounty for the crime, since you were invisible when you did it. You don't even need to put more than 1 point into this unless you want to increase the stun duration on enemies. Enduring Agony is a Tier 4 passive that extends the duration of all poison and bleeding damage dealt by your attacks. It also grants a bonus to Shadow Flare's damage. Generally, you will likely deal either poison or bleeding damage when you have a dagger or Feyblade build, and of course, Shadow Flare also deals bleeding damage itself. So even if your weapons don't deal that much poison or bleed, this passive is amazing just for the upgrade to Shadow Flare. It doesn't increase its mana cost, so you can max it out without downsides. Blade Honing is a Tier 4 sustained ability that increases the critical damage of all edged weapons: longswords, greatswords, daggers, Feyblades, and chakrams. The cost to sustain it is just 15% of your max mana, which is lower than all other sustained abilities. This is potentially great if you have a high crit chance build or a sneak attack build, since sneak attacks count as crits. Generally, if you've invested up to Tier 4 of Finesse and you're using some of these weapon types, you do have bonuses to crit chance and would likely benefit from this. But if you have some other type of build that's more focused on damage over time rather than crits, ignore Blade Honing. Finally, here are the best sorcery abilities. It's a bit harder to recommend abilities from here because the single element damaging spells are very strong, but they require higher investment towards bonuses for that specific element, plus some enemies are highly resistant or immune to an element. You should always deal at least 2 damage types with your build, either physical plus 1 element, 2 elements, or even all 3 elements when you're investing highly into sorcery. I will mention the abilities that are generally useful for most builds because they don't just focus on one element. Sphere of Protection, Conservative Casting, Summon Fair Gorta, Healing Surge but only when outside of combat, Transference, Sphere of Reprisal, and potentially Masterful Construction and Elemental Rage if you reach Tier 5. Sphere of Protection is a Tier 2 sustained ability that grants damage resistance. It costs 30% of your maximum mana, so only use this if you feel like you really needed the damage resistance. I use this as a pure mage or a sorcery plus finesse build because these builds are squishier, so failing to dodge an enemy attack or spell, especially on higher difficulties, can result in being one-shot or brought close to death. If you have lots of mana and more importantly good mana regen, it's fine that Sphere of Protection takes up some of it, but I wouldn't use too many sustained abilities at the same time unless you're basically only going to use regular attacks, like let's say a crit poison build with daggers or Feyblades that uses Envenomed Edge, Blade Honing, and Sphere of Protection as its sustained abilities. Totally viable to do something like that, but you have to be careful since you will barely have any mana left for activated abilities. Conservative Casting is a Tier 2 passive that reduces the mana costs of your abilities. This is probably the best low-tier sorcery ability to get for any build because it reduces the cost of any ability, not just from sorcery. The downside is that both this and Sphere of Protection are Tier 2 abilities, so it means you have to spend 5 points in Tier 1 of sorcery, which is pretty bad unless you want to use Stormbolt for lightning damage, or you fancy staffs or scepters as your magic weapon. Summon Fair Gorta is a Tier 3 activated ability that summons a skeleton to fight for you for 2 minutes. Each level increases its health and damage, but the mana cost is also increased by a little bit. This is a great ability for any build because it gives you an extra body on the field, but it's most useful as a tank of sorts for squishier builds like pure sorcery or sorcery plus finesse. Healing Surge is a tier 3 activated ability that restores HP based on how long you charge it. It always costs at least 30% of your max mana and up to 20% more to fully charge it. This ability is horrible in combat because it uses up so much of your mana for very little healing. However, it's amazing in exploration mode because if you're not at full health, you can use this to restore yourself to full so that you don't have to go to sleep in a bed or pay a healer NPC. If you have health regen bonuses on gear, you can ignore this since you'll heal up over time with no issue. Transference is a tier 4 upgrade to summon Fair Gorta that adds a chance for your skeleton minions' attacks to steal health from an enemy and restore it to your hero. A great upgrade for an already amazing ability, plus it doesn't increase its mana cost. Sphere of Reprisal is a tier 4 upgrade to Sphere of Protection that creates orbs around you while the sphere is active that deal physical damage to nearby enemies. The orbs will respawn a short time after damaging an enemy. This doesn't increase the mana cost of Sphere of Protection, so it's a decent upgrade since enemies can be interrupted by the damage, giving you a bit more time to finish charging up an attack or spell to kill them. It's not the best upgrade, but if you get up to tier 4 sorcery and use Sphere of Protection, I recommend at least 1 or 2 points in this. Masterful Construction is a tier 5 upgrade to summon Fair Gorta that increases the number of attacks in the minion's attack chain and also increases its crit chance. If you get up to tier 5 sorcery and use the skeleton a lot, the attack chain upgrade is very powerful, so I recommend maxing this out or at least spending 3 points. Finally, Elemental Rage is a tier 5 activated ability that has up to a 3 cast combo. The first deals lightning damage in an area and pulls enemies towards its center. The second deals fire damage in the area and propels your hero away from the enemies, and the third cast deals ice damage in the area and slows the enemies, if they're still alive. The total damage of this ability is very high, though obviously you have to cast it 3 times, which costs a decent chunk of mana. But this is probably the best elemental damage ability simply due to the fact that it uses all 3 elements, so even if an enemy is immune to one, you will still damage it with the other 2. If you invest even more into sorcery, at tier 6 there is a further upgrade to Sphere of Protection called Sphere of Retribution that causes your protective shield to periodically shoot projectiles at any enemies that get near you, dealing physical damage and staggering them at level 2 or knocking them down from level 4 onwards. This is great for a mostly pure sorcery build since you will be quite squishy and vulnerable to getting interrupted by enemy attacks, and the projectiles have specifically disabling effects compared to the slight chance to interrupt that the previous upgrade had. But only get this if you're already putting a lot of points into sorcery. Otherwise, if you want easy interruption resistance to charge your attacks and spells in peace, just get the Relentless Assault ability from the Might Tree. Way easier to get, and you don't even need to upgrade it with the higher tier abilities. Finally, remember to also max out the Weapon Mastery for whichever main weapon or weapons you're using to increase their damage, and optionally unlock and upgrade any special attack moves from the left column of each tree if you want to use them. Next up, let's talk briefly about the best stats on gear, whether weapons, armor, or accessories. The best offensive stats are higher base damage on your weapons and bonuses to the damage types you deal the most with attacks and abilities, crit chance and crit damage if you are making a crit-focused build, and there is even crit chance for magic specifically, and bonuses to specific effects that your build may be based around: stun, bleed, poison, panic, shock, freeze, or burn. For defensive stats, health is king because it protects you against everything and gives you a bigger health pool, so even if you do get hit, you can take it. Damage resistance is second because it reduces all the damage you take, regardless of type. Afterwards, it's armor and elemental resistance. Armor reduces physical damage types, and elemental resistance reduces damage from ice, fire, and lightning. Stay away from single element or damage type resistances, they're not worth it. For utility, the main thing you want is mana and mana regen if your build uses activated abilities often. Even if you don't use abilities super often, it's still good to have some bonuses to mana and mana regen to ensure that you can use the few but amazing abilities you have in your build, such as Relentless Assault or Shadow Flare. You may also want to look for things like extra evasion, aka chance to dodge, bonuses to abilities, might, finesse, sorcery, or plus all, and bonuses to specific skills like stealth, lockpick, persuasion, and so on. Health regeneration can be nice, mainly to make it easier for you to get it back up to full health once outside of combat, but it can also be useful in longer fights. Extremely situational bonuses, such as bonus damage against a particular enemy type or bonus damage during the day or night, are really not worth it. You can just find general plus damage percent bonuses or bonuses to the main damage types you deal with your build, which are just as good, if not better, than those situational ones. Here are some important tips to remember while exploring. When you are in a new region, if you see a town or dungeon you haven't been to before nearby, run closer to it until you get a pop-up that says you discovered that location. This will allow you to fast travel to it from the world map, so even if you don't want to go explore that place right now, you'll have it easily available later. Always keep one weapon with you that you can equip, which deals at least a little bit of fire damage. This is crucial for burning cobwebs because fire damage is the only way to get past them, and otherwise you will be stuck and have to backtrack to get a source of fire damage. Look out for god shrines when you're exploring out in the world. When you interact with shrines, they grant a temporary buff to a stat, such as bonus damage, chance to steal health and mana per hit, health regen, crit chance and crit damage, bonus XP and status effect duration, and reduced mana costs. You can find shrines dotted around each region, and shrines to Mitharu specifically can also be found at the monasteries that are called Saint Something's Mission. Mitharu's buff is the weakest, only granting a tiny bit of health regen, but nevertheless, if you're near a shrine, you might as well get a free buff. Your character's skills are also mostly related to exploration, interactions with NPCs, and crafting, but there are some skills that are good for combat directly or indirectly. Whenever you level up, you get 1 skill point and 3 ability points to spend. By the max level 40, you'll have 40 total skill points baseline, plus whatever else you can get from training, gear bonuses, skill books, and twists of fate. It's more than enough since you don't need to max out every single skill. Stealth is mandatory for a sneak attack build, at least until you unlock Smoke Bomb at tier 4 of Finesse, which makes you temporarily invisible. If you don't enjoy the slow movement speed of sneaking, once you get Smoke Bomb you can respecialize your character and remove most or all points invested in stealth, and only use Smoke Bomb for assassinations. Detect Hidden is another skill that can be very helpful for sneak attacks because at rank 1 you get enemies and other characters showing up on your minimap, and at rank 3 you also see the direction that enemies are facing, which helps you figure out ahead of time how to sneak past them or behind them. Detect Hidden is also amazing for exploration and loot, so I recommend getting it to at least level 5. At level 2 you see hidden treasures on the minimap that become lootable when you're next to them, at level 4 you can disarm traps, and at level 5 secret doors are displayed on the minimap and revealed when in range. And of course, often secret doors mean extra loot. At level 10, all lore stones and non-corpse treasures will show on the minimap as well, which is useful for a completionist who wants to explore the areas completely without the use of external guides. The crafting skills are obviously useful for combat because you get to craft your own gear and consumables, but they are by no means necessary. Alchemy lets you craft potions. At higher levels you can use more ingredients for a stronger effect, and at the max level you automatically unlock all the recipes so you don't have to earn them from quests or buy them from merchants. But I personally don't recommend alchemy, simply because the only potions you need are healing and mana potions, which are easily found as loot and bought from merchants. Most of the other potions are kind of useless, so you can sell them. The only exception are the potions that grant bonus XP when killing enemies. I recommend using those when fighting larger groups of enemies or a boss, especially if you're activating Reckoning mode. Blacksmithing lets you craft your own weapons and armor, and also increases the effectiveness of the repair kit consumable, which restores the durability of your gear. Weapons and armor provide the same damage and protection regardless of their durability until they break completely at 0. Repairing equipment at NPCs costs gold, and the price increases the worse condition the item is in. Because of this, I recommend for you to never pay NPCs for repairs because it is expensive as all hell. Just buy repair kits from blacksmith NPCs. You may also find some as loot, since they cost generally under 100 gold. Repairs from NPCs costs thousands, if not tens of thousands of gold. Crafting gear can be nice, but it's not good at lower levels. At least get to level 4 blacksmithing to be able to craft an item with 4 components instead of just the base 2. Ideally, get to level 7 so you can use gems as extra components. The bonus at level 10 says it creates master crafted gear, but that just adds a bit of extra base damage or armor to your items, which is not significant enough to be worth maxing out blacksmithing unless you really want to. Sage crafting allows you to create gems by combining shards and create higher tier shards by combining 2 that are the same. Even if you don't craft your own gear with blacksmithing, I recommend getting at least a few points into sage crafting because gems are very expensive at merchants and you very rarely get them as loot or quest rewards. Gems can have very powerful effects for your build, and even if you just get to level 6 of sage crafting, you will be able to make some very good gems with pristine shards. However, level 8 is best because you can craft epic gems, which are used when crafting chest pieces if you have blacksmithing level 7, and also socketed into chest pieces. As their name implies, epic gems are very powerful. The max level of sage crafting isn't worth it. You can just remove socketed gems from your gear at sagecraft altars for free without needing to pay a sagecraft NPC instead. Mercantile isn't at all useful for combat directly, but it reduces the prices of goods and services you buy from NPCs and increases the money you get from selling items. This is amazing if you want to spend gold to train your skills or respecialize your character, and of course, buy useful gear or consumables from merchants. Mercantile also affects how much money you spend or receive in certain quests. Persuasion is mostly useful if you want to have extra dialogue options in quests. You can sometimes get additional items or gold through persuasion options, or avoid combat entirely, but otherwise it doesn't really have anything to do with combat. Lockpick and Dispel make it easier for you to get more money and gear, but it's not necessary to spend a lot of points into them. For Lockpick, the minigame is very easy, basically like Skyrim, so you just need to buy more lockpicks if you have a lower skill level, since your lockpicks will break more often. Plus, you have access to Prismeer lockpicks, which are one-time use but automatically open a lock of any level. I recommend keeping Prismeer lockpicks for very hard locks, and manually unlocking all the lower difficulties. Dispel is a bit trickier. Warded chests can technically be opened even if you fail the Dispel minigame, but you will take damage and a curse with nasty effects is applied to you. You can only remove curses by paying a healer NPC. You could ignore the warded chests and lose out on the extra loot, or else get at least a few points into the Dispel so you can have a decent chance of succeeding at the minigame. It's a pretty annoying timing-based thing though, so don't sweat it if you fail, just save beforehand just in case the explosion deals enough damage to kill you. Training skills is done by paying a special trainer NPC. You can only train at each NPC once per game. Each trainer has a level. Basic trainers can train you between level 0 and 3, advanced trainers between 4 and 6, and master trainers between 7 and 9. Training costs quite a lot, from around 15,000 gold at a base level, so if you invest in Mercantile early, you can reduce the amount of gold you spend by a very significant amount. So I always recommend Mercantile as a utility skill for everyone. It's even worth it to train with the basic Mercantile trainers early to immediately reduce the cost of all other training services and gear. One little thing to mention related to skills and stat bonuses is character creation. When you choose your character's race out of Almain, Varani, Lyosalfar, and Dokalfar, you get certain starting bonuses to your skills. Almain get +2 blacksmithing, +1 alchemy, and +1 persuasion. They are the best choice if you want to try out blacksmithing, plus the persuasion bonus is nice if you want to keep investing in it for extra options and quests. The alchemy is kind of useless, but you may enjoy it, in which case it's great. Varani get +2 lockpicking, +1 detect hidden, and +1 mercantile. Lockpicking is easy, so you barely need any points in lockpicking, especially because you have Prismeer lockpicks, so this +2 bonus is kind of a waste. Detect hidden is always great, and this +1 means that when you level up after the tutorial, if you put your point in this, you'll be able to see hidden treasures on the map for extra loot right away. Mercantile is the most useful utility skill. This is a decent starting bonus for exploration and money, even if lockpicking isn't needed, so it's better than the Almain if you don't care about crafting but want your character to look human. Lyosalfar get +2 Dispel, +1 Alchemy, and +1 Sagecraft. Dispel is more difficult and has a nasty curse effect if you fail, so it's always good to have an early bonus if you want to more easily be able to loot all the treasure. Alchemy is potentially useless unless you like it. Sagecrafting, however, is good to have an early bonus to, so you can put a few more points into it and craft powerful gems for your equipment. Finally, Dokalfar get +2 Stealth, +1 Persuasion, and +1 Sagecraft. As you can imagine, they are the best for a sneak attack build due to the +2 to stealth. However, you level up very quickly in the early game and can use NPC training for an extra boost, so it's not necessary to pick Dokalfar for a sneaky character. The bonuses to Persuasion and Sagecraft make them my favorites though. I love having extra dialogue options, and gems are very strong as I've mentioned. Plus, I think Dark Elves look cool. You also get a different patron god choice based on your race. Patron gods grant tiny bonuses to various stats: an elemental damage plus stat resistance, fire, ice, lightning, or poison, crit chance and crit damage, elemental resistance, mana and mana regen, mana, health and mana, health and crit chance, and finally physical damage and armor. You can choose to not follow any god, getting +1% XP instead. Most of the gods are fine, but bonuses to one specific damage type are only useful if you're planning on making a build that focuses on that damage type. I generally recommend picking health, mana, or crit chance related bonuses, but the bonuses are mostly insignificant after a few level ups, so choose whatever you think works with your character. There's one more thing that grants permanent bonuses to your stats and skills: Twists of Fate. These are special cards added to your character when you finish certain quests, specifically main quests, faction quest lines, and DLC quests. There's also a couple of Twists of Fate you get for free from the DLC content chest if you open it, but the bonuses are tiny. For the Warsworn Travelers and Scholia Arcana, you get one of 2 different twists based on the choice you make at the end of the quest lines. For the main quests, other factions, and DLCs, you get the same Twist of Fate no matter your choices. The bonuses are nice to have but not necessary, though the Warsworn Travelers and Scholia Arcana twists do grant +1 to Might, Finesse, and Sorcery abilities respectively, which is a pretty solid bonus. They will also give you some decent warrior, rogue, or mage gear, which can be helpful in the early game. But don't sweat it if you don't want to follow a particular questline. These bonuses are small in the grand scheme of things, so there's nothing wrong with skipping content you're not interested in. I recommend role-playing your character's journey through Amalur and only doing what you think they would actually want to do, because there's a ton of quests and areas, and it can quickly become tiring if you try to complete everything. With this last piece of advice, I'm ending the beginner's guide to combat in Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. I don't think combat in this game is too complicated or difficult by any means, though as an older gamer who has a ton of experience playing RPGs, I can see how the many possible combinations of weapons and abilities and gear could feel overwhelming to new players. Hopefully, with this guide you feel more comfortable and understand how the game works a bit better, so get in there and make your own build. Until then, I want to say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much. Your support lets me keep going with this tiny channel where I only talk about the games I actually care about. Subscribing and becoming a member are the best ways to support me, but of course only if you want to and can afford it. Even just watching the video helps me a ton, and optionally liking it if you enjoyed it and maybe leaving a kind comment. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. I wish you a happy rest of your day or evening. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.